Hello and welcome to Design Chat, the best live design discussion on the internet. I'm your host, Ryan McGovern. On Twitter, I'm at Hoobajube and at DesignChat. We get together every week and we bring some of the coolest people in design today to the design community and let you interact with them. How this is going to go down, if you haven't been here for a show before, this is an hour-long show. We're doing live video right now, and we're screen capturing it. It'll live on the web as a podcast later. But lucky you, you're here live, and you get to ask questions. So here's how it's going to go down. We're going to do about 45 minutes, half hour of chat between myself and Chuck, and then at the end, go ahead and ask questions throughout the whole thing. We're going to harvest those questions, and at the end of the chat, I'm going to serve those questions back up to Chuck and give you credit for them, of course. I will not take credit for your questions, I promise. So tonight, golf clap, Chuck Anderson. Thank you so much for coming of nopattern.com. Wow, man. The first time I saw your artwork was probably, I want to say it's almost been 5 years ago now, that I saw something that you had gotten published, I believe it was Communication Arts.
Yeah.
And your artwork sort of has that magic to it where the image will grab you right away, and it's very inspiring. Whether you like the style or not, it's something that you just can't stop looking at, and I think that's why so many people are drawn to you, you know. And I'm very excited. First of all, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I
Awesome
turned you down
man.
once. I had to make sure I got back to you and made it up.
Awesome. So yeah, it's cool to see this sort of come to fruition, because I mean, 5 years ago when I first sort of heard about you, you know, you get that feeling right away where this is something cool is going to happen with this guy, right? He's going to start taking off, and that's exactly what's happened. If anybody has been to see his work before, Chuck just threw the link in there, nopattern.com. It's truly moving stuff. So I don't even know where to start. You were pretty young when you started, right?
Yeah, I was 18, pretty much, I mean, literally like right out of high school, and yeah, I mean, I never know where to begin, because I kind of went through all sorts of different, you know, little side jobs, and I worked at Threadless for a little while, packing T-shirts, and
While you were in high school?
no, like right out of high school.
Right out of high school.
Yeah, right out of high school after I decided not to go to school. I was going to go to school after taking a year off, and then it just didn't pan out that way. Because all this stuff pretty much got started like while I was taking that year off, and I just kind of ran with it and didn't look back from there.
So what's the first first sort of interaction where a piece of artwork you had done was recognized or picked up, or the first time somebody said, I'm going to give you money to do what you do?
When's the first time that happened? Like the first ever? The first paid job I ever had, actually, I don't know if people here are from the Chicago area, but you would know. There's a pizza place in the Chicago area called Aurelio's.
Uh-huh.
And I had a friend who was a manager at one and needed a website built for it. And this is while I was still in high school, actually.
Oh,
and
wow.
I had like really basic, web design abilities, like really, really basic. Now, keep in mind, this is 8 years ago now. So, it was a while ago. And I put together this site, and I thought it was
pre-Web 2.0.
This is like way
This is
back.
like almost Netscape era.
Yeah. Yeah. Who didn't design a website for someone in their high school? No, I mean, everybody did. But I remember the main thing with the money was that I asked for $500, thinking that that was pretty good, because like all my paychecks to the time when I was working at like a bookstore or somewhere else would be about that much.
Right.
And so I did this whole thing, and I spent weeks on it, and then later on he literally told me, hey, it was really a pleasure to have you do this. The guy who did the one for the other chain location charges $5,000, and I was like, well, thanks for telling me now.
That's awesome. So
that's kind of when I realized that maybe there's money in creating things, and I'd just love to create all my life, and so it was nice to have that sink in, and then things change from there. But that was like way back.
Right. One of the subjects I'm really interested in talking to you about is that sort of transition where, making that realization that I can make a living doing this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And your particular case, which is unusual for most situations, where you were running right out of the gate out of high school and operating and functioning on a very high level, without having to go through whatever, sort of school or training or something like that. Uh-huh. So I guess my question there is in high school, was that something that, you had a mentor, or you were taking the high school classes, or were you taking art classes outside of that? You were obviously creating things at a young age. Was that something that was cultivated by classes or anything like that?
I really grew up, like, my dad always drew. As long as I can remember, my dad used to draw like superheroes and comics and things like that. And I just grew up really loving to draw. And then when I got into high school, and actually I got in junior high, there was like, art class that wasn't like, stupid art class in grade school. It was like somewhat of a take yourself a little seriously. And I really enjoyed that, and I started getting people like, noticing that I liked to draw, noticing that I was good at drawing, and I would draw like Simpsons characters. I would like draw my friends as Simpsons characters. This is like 8th grade. This is a long time ago, and when I got into high school, there was more. I was really blessed to go to a really good high school that offered like. Someone said my audio was cutting out.
You're pretty clear for me, so just keep on running with it.
Okay. Okay, cool. So, I got into high school, and I went to a really good high school. I was very fortunate to go to a high school that offered all sorts of different art classes, not just like basic art, So, I started taking classes after the art fundamentals that you had to take was out of the way. That was like photography and drawing and animation and like all these different classes, and then that's when I really started getting involved, and I started doing stuff outside of high school, like on my own time. Mm-hmm. I eventually got No Pattern up and running when I was a junior in high school, and that was just like all personal work at the time. And yeah.
So you got to ask where the name came from then, No Pattern. Starting so early like that.
When I first started, I had like all these different names. Actually, if anybody's ever been like in a band, you kind of know, like you sit down and you write out all sorts of names, and that's kind of what I did. Like it was like I wrote out all these different names, and I eventually stuck with the one that I liked. I don't even remember all the ones I had in the beginning, and a couple of the ones I do remember I probably won't even say because they probably sound pretty corny, but I remember landing on No Pattern, and the domain was available, and I just really liked it, and I just thought, all right, I'll go with that.
That's half the battle, isn't it? Making sure that there's an open domain.
Well, at the time, it wasn't nearly as big of a deal. This is like, I first registered No Pattern in 2002, so like 8 years ago. And there was still, a little more slim pickings for that, but it was not as probably as hard as it would be right now. But
so what are the original stuff some of the first stuff that you started creating, did that look anything, was there some sort of representation of what your artwork looks like today in that?
In the first few things I did?
Yeah.
Like way back when? I think I've always been interested in like light and color and kind of, when I first got my hands on Photoshop, it was just like everybody else, like filters and just kind of going crazy, open a picture and just do all this stupid stuff to it.
Right.
And I think what happened was I learned to control that a little bit and do things with a purpose instead of just kind of like, going crazy with something. That's when I started to realize, and this is a long time ago, so my work wasn't always like what it looks like now, of course, but I've always been interested in photography from the first time I had. This is funny for anybody in here that's older who first got into film. It was like, for me, my first digital camera, like one of the memories built into the camera, and like terrible pictures, not even like 1 megapixel, just like all 640 by 480, and
they were basically web images.
Yeah, terrible. And I just remember using that, and I remember like pointing it at the sun. Someone's asking me about DeviantArt. I'll talk about that later.
We'll get there.
And I remember pointing a camera like right at the sun, and then like seeing, like this streak of light that like cut through the middle of the camera, or a lens flare, and I was like, wow, that's interesting that I didn't see that before I held the camera up to it. And I
Right.
think that's kind of, little experiments like that is, playing around with stuff, just fascinating to me. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I could talk forever about like, you know, the inspiration for my work now, but it's just kind
And
of been
that's
an
totally what we want to
evolution.
hear. We want to saturate into what makes you tick and what makes you produce the
Hmm.
images that you do, because you do really do just absolutely hands down amazing work that since you started getting published like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I mean, honestly, it's been mimicked, and I think you've inspired a whole league of artists to start experimenting and doing, taking those risks, taking those jumps, trying to figure out how to create something new and something fresh. And
Well,
it's just
thank you. I
been
appreciate
really a
that.
joy to watch.
I appreciate that. I certainly didn't set out to to do anything like that. I mean, I think it's really difficult now. I actually spoke to a really big group of high school students last week, and a lot of them are asking like, how do you get your name out there? Like, how do you start? And it's really different because like when I started like 7 years ago doing this, I mean, it was a really thin field of design. There was a handful of design news sites. So it was like News Today, Surf
Uh-huh.
Station, Lounge 72, Design is Kinky. There's like, just a real, and you work for them. Like, there's a handful of K10K, yeah, like all these sites. But there weren't that many of them. But like everybody who used them, I think you kind of like found, if you kind of found this like inner circle of people online that were artists and designers, but also really interested in that kind of community online. And it was really pivotal to get involved in that. And yeah, so.
And and those things are, just launching out today. There are so many new sites. It seems like every week there's a new interaction or a new way to do something. And it's a
Hmm.
very exciting time to be involved in this sort of online design community. And that's why we're here doing what we're doing tonight.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
exactly. So when you started sort of getting noticed and the phone started ringing more, was that right out of high school? Was it a couple years out of high school? Was there a time where you had to sort of get the self-promotion machine running, and go out and pimp your artwork and start, trying to get it published in different places?
Um, right out of the gate, like when I first, actually, I should say this. When I worked at Threadless, the way that happened was I had a shirt printed by Threadless a long time ago.
Uh-huh.
And this is when they were small. Like now they're huge, and they like, the amount of money they're paying people, and the amount of people that work for them, and they're just such a big company. But then there was like 4 people, working there at the time. And I went over and I met one of the guys over there, Jeffrey Kalmakoff, who now actually is in San Francisco working at Dig. But I still, owe a lot to him. He really helped me out, and he actually gave me my first job that wasn't that stupid like pizza website. He for anybody who's familiar with Chicago, or even if you've only been to Chicago before, you've probably heard of the Metro. It's like the big venue.
Mm-hmm.
Besides like the House of Blues, like the Metro is it. And there was a club next to the Metro called Smart Bar, and Jeffrey used to do all the flyers for Smart Bar.
Uh-huh.
And at one point he couldn't do them anymore, and he basically said, hey, are you interested in working on these? They're $100 a pop, and you can do whatever you want pretty much. And so I said yeah, and he gave me that job, and they continued to give me flyer work for like 2 years and maybe even longer. I mean, I did one as I think just 2 years ago I did another one. But yeah, so it's like little things like that, in the beginning, having someone like really help me out and really be there, to like when I needed to know what an invoice was, I was able to ask Jeffrey. And I think it's really important that a lot of young people, especially high school, especially people in high school right now who are like really trying to jump the gun and like think like, hey, how can I, get this big job? How can I get big clients and stuff? Like, if you think that way versus just kind of like having it be organic and meet people and just go about doing it because you enjoy doing it and it's something that's fun to
Right.
do, I think it's a lot more difficult to really try and force it. So that was
Do you
how in the
think you could
beginning,
put a
like,
percentage like on what a percentage on the amount of time you spend and what part of that is business and what part of that is art and creation?
Like nowadays, or like when I was.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I don't know. I couldn't say a percentage. I mean, like a lot of time is emails and phone calls and conference calls, whatever, and then the rest of the time spent creating. But it just depends. It really depends on the job I'm working on, and
Does that ever sort of taint it or get in the way of what you're trying to do, or sort of like take away from the project or something like that? Because I've always sort of had that feeling like whenever I take on side jobs,
yeah,
and it's outside of my 9 to 5, because I've always worked at agencies and that sort of
right.
thing. Whenever I'm trying to do some sort of side thing and I'm working with a company that doesn't usually do creative work or anything like that, getting the business part out of the way and getting to the creative has always been a challenge for me.
Yeah,
and being
for
able
sure.
to separate those two and move on with the project.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, now that I've been doing this for like entering my 7th year of doing this, you know, those first 5 years were just entirely myself, like just me, and that was it. About a year and a half ago, I worked on a project with Joshua Davis. If anybody who doesn't know, it's joshuadavis.com, and super, super influential designer. Like, I mean, for me to work with him was just a real pleasure, and for me. And I worked with him, and on all the calls with the client, there was this other guy, and he was kind of like talking, not for Josh, but like on behalf of Josh, for business stuff. And his name is Eric, and after that project wrapped up, Josh actually suggested I talk to Eric, and he, Eric works with Josh and all the business end of things, and I talked to Eric, and he proposed that we try some projects together, and so for the last year and a half, I've been working with this guy who really helps me out a lot with just handling a lot of the business side of things, so I can focus on the creation, and I still stay involved because it's still like my business, but I.
But some of that load has been lifted where you can definitely concentrate on those projects.
Right. And I think you got to do, I was afraid to do it at first because, I was young, like, I'm 24 now, and so when he first approached me, I was 22, and the thought of like handing any of my work off to anybody at all kind of, freaked me out a little bit, like in any capacity. And I think, when I realized that it could be a step forward for me to, try and bring someone on and help me out with something like that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. And it's been really instrumental and very helpful, to have someone like that to work with. So
early on, you started doing those music flyers, and that sort of started, giving you some regular work. So how, along your path, how integral has the music scene been in your career? Is that something that you've stayed tight with? I mean, obviously you got your drums in the back. You obviously play some music. You get involved. Is that something that, sort of influences and crosses over for you? Like, are we going to see you in a band anytime soon?
I was in a band in high school. I sang in the band, and I won't sing now. And I actually don't play drums like, very well. It's more of like something that was kind of a hobby. I did a little bit, and I just really enjoy sitting down sometimes when nobody's around and kind of going at it with them and kind of get a little bit of energy out. When you sit in front of a computer all day, like I don't know how you are. Sorry, I hate these Apple.
Like 12 hours a day, I'm in front of this stupid screen.
Yeah. I mean,
I
like
get scoliosis from being in front of a keyboard, man.
Yeah, I definitely like to go, like in the summer, go ride my bike, go work out, go run, anything to get energy out of me, regardless of whether it's physical or if I'm going out and like, even just go, go out with friends or whatever. But like, you got to do those other things for sure.
Yeah.
How do we get onto that? I think you asked me something else. I can't remember what you had asked.
More questions coming through.
No, I'm sorry. You had asked me something else, and we kind of like got off the.
It happens. Don't worry. See, that's the excitement in doing this live show. Anything can happen, man.
Anything can happen, guys.
Anything and everything. Last week was a hoot if you were around for that one. That was a lot of fun. We had a hacker come in here, was shutting off our video left and right. He was actually taunting me. There was like
my work helped me with the ladies. Yes, it does. It does help.
See? Proof positive. See? All designers, we get hitched. That's how it works. So I'm just totally randomly going off on separate subjects. So you had suggested earlier, we were emailing back and forth, to talk about this subject. IMakeMyCase.com is a project that you were involved in recently. So why don't you kick that off a little bit? Tell us a little bit about the history and where that came from.
Okay. So iMakeMyCase.com is a project that I worked on for Casemate, and Casemate's a company that makes like iPhone cases and all different types of cases for all sorts of like accessories and mobile devices and stuff. They had approached me about doing some art for them back in like July for a project that was similar to what I Make My Cases now, but it was something else entirely at the time. They were just going to have all these different artists submit work, and then they were going to print like vinyl, sticker type applications for phones. Yeah. But I Make My Case basically happened when myself and the guy that I worked with, I was talking about before, Eric. They approached me, and then it kind of turned into this. Hey, how can we make this more of that? How can we make this more than just like another company that prints up little vinyl stickers to put on the back of your phone? And Casemate really wanted to kind of step out, the boundary and do something really, really different, which was really awesome. So basically, we mocked up a couple things for what the website might look like, really pretty much in one night. Me and Eric sat down and we had this idea of wanting to take artists' work and have the elements and the assets from their work, and then be able to bring it over and use their work, but create your own composition. So it's kind of a fail-safe. Like the work's going to look really good, but the composition's up to you. And yeah, so pretty much like between August to like January of this year, that project was going on, and I was able to hand pick. There was 10 artists. I was one of them, and then 9 other artists. Let's see, there was Hannah Stauffer, Nigel Dennis, Anthony Yankovic, Ray Frenden, Matt Moore, Shadow Chen, Deanne Chuk, and Thomas Hooper, and Joshua Davis. I think that's all 10 of them. And man, it was just a blast to work with all those guys.
You worked hand in hand creating all the original artwork for this project.
They all created stuff. They all created work, and then I pulled it together, based on what they gave me, and we worked with a super, probably one of the most talented group of guys I've ever worked with before. Out in San Francisco, a company called Proto. I'll type out the link here.
URL.
Yeah.
Oh, it's up there already.
Yeah, I just posted it down there. Proto is a interactive studio out in San Francisco, and just seriously, some of the most talented guys. They were able to do everything we wanted to with the site, and be able to take these assets from artists, whether they were vector or raster elements or whatever, and then take them from the website, put it on a case, and then actually translate that to a high-res file that got sent off to Casemate, and then they print it in-house, and then it gets sent out to the customer. But yeah, really cool.
So growing up in the sort of time that we did, it seems like there's if you're going to be involved in the creative arts right now, you're not going to be able to avoid getting involved in the interactive world and sort of end up doing some user interface design. Are there any sources out there right now of different agencies like the one you just mentioned in San Francisco, or other projects or things that are sort of inspiring to you?
Oh man, there's so many. Trying to think, lately I've been more inspired by, it's so hard to even know where to start. A lot of fine artists, this is really funny, but a lot of my favorite artwork is stuff that seriously looks nothing like mine, or isn't even digitally created. I think I'm inspired by people who just are themselves, rather than the type of work that I do. How can I get inspired by more and more and more, of that kind of work, or digital, bright, colorful stuff. I like all that, but I really get inspired.
But you can get burnt out.
Yeah, totally. And I think James Jean is one of my biggest inspirations, just in terms of sheer amazement at the talent that he has. I'll be sure to type out these URLs if anybody else wants to check them out. But he's a painter. I don't have to just go to his site, and there's no point in even trying to explain.
You don't have to explain it any further, right?
Don't need to. This guy back here, Dave Kinsey. You can't really see it; it's a bunch of zebras, but
nice.
Dave Kinsey. Cause has long been one of my absolute favorite artists. I'm trying to type this up. He's again, stuff that looks nothing like what I do, but at all. But I just love his work ethic. I love the products that he creates. I love his imagination, the ability to consistently do things over and over and over again throughout the years and keep people's attention. It just like blows my mind. I love it.
Because of that,
so
do you
cool.
experiment in different styles just for fun? Like, will you
Oh yeah, totally.
pull out some paper and pens and paints and that sort of thing and just go to town?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't busted out the paints and pens in a long time, which is unfortunate. I know, and yes, Tomer Hanukkah is awesome. Shapeshifter just posted about Tomer Hanukkah. He's one of my favorites, and so is Marcel Zama. But yeah, I think it's super important to always be experimenting with other things. I mean, the name No Pattern really stemmed from two things. Like one of them was the idea of like just kind of doing whatever you want, not being restricted to just one certain style or one certain thing. I find you end up having a certain look for sure. Like I'm well aware that my work is mainly known for a certain style right now, but I feel like I have every reason to think I can rainbows exactly. Like I can pretty much do whatever I want. Nobody's
So you don't
stopping
feel
me.
bound by the sort of path that you've already had. You don't feel like you've been typecast to only producing commercial artwork that looks that same sort of style
Right.
this whole time.
I mean, like I do a lot of drawings. You see on my site, like a lot of like hand drawn stuff, and it's not the most refined stuff in the world, but it's fun, and I really enjoy doing it. And as long as things are fun to me, then I keep doing them and keep trying. New things, and I think actually like one of the things I say to people, especially when I speak to high school students, like I did last week, like I just tell them experiment, like you might really enjoy using Photoshop right now, and it seems really exciting, and that's awesome, and there's a lot to learn in Photoshop. Like, I feel like after 9 years of using Photoshop, I still I still know very little about. Like I feel like I learn more and more every day, and I just like to encourage people to try a little bit of everything. Like I'm really bummed out. I mean, by the fact that no, I didn't go to college, and yes, I was able to gain 4 years of actual work experience out of that, and I really wouldn't trade that for anything. But I definitely missed out on a lot of things that I'd love to know more about, like figure drawing or whether figure drawing or like painting. I'd love to know how to oil paint, and I don't.
Right. Yeah.
And I know this Connick in here, devil's advocate all the time, but it's all right. I love him. I don't know. Like different college is different for different people, but I feel like there's certain technical things or resources or tools that you might not have access to if you're on your own, but are made available to you should you be if you're in school. And I had to make do with what I had and my computer, and totally depends on where you went to school and what they have available to you, I'm sure, but there's pros and cons of doing it both ways.
The subject has come up a lot recently because of the whole release of the iPad and touch interfaces getting closer and closer to sort of the design world. Is this something that excites you at all, where because I kind of see this pattern of there are more and more physical touch interfaces that are being released right now and developed, and it's only a matter of time before companies like Adobe, and all these interactive creative companies start publishing software that takes advantage of that, which I think is going to sort of transcend into a new era of creation and start new looks and exciting new art styles, because it's changing the physical way that we interact with the machines and create images and text and tell stories. Is this something that you've sort of played with or seen things come out, or?
Well, I mean, I'm just well aware that everything's going to change. Like, I mean, I don't think when the internet came out, initially in the mainstream capacity that it did, that people ever thought it would be such a integrated part of life. Where it's like, I mean, I would say pretty much everybody who's in here right now, depends on the internet for communication or for work or whatever, and it's, I don't know, I just don't think we know yet. And I think with stuff like iPad or anything like that, any new technology that doesn't seem quite like we get it yet, will probably find its place, and some things fall off and don't, but the bigger ones, and typically Apple gets it right. So we'll see. I don't know how my work would play into that, but I like to think that there'll be opportunities to do stuff where, like Josh Davis has a really cool iPhone app right now called Reflect, and there's no reason to think that any artist who's interested couldn't hook up with a good studio and get a cool app out there and have something to play with.
Or produce it themselves, because they're making it so easy. These developer kits that they're releasing are, in some cases, are just drag and drop. Want this button here, put it there. And then you type in, I want it to connect to this sort of thing.
Yeah.
My hope is, with Apple is they, some people, there is a sort of perception that Apple is sort of getting away from the creative community, which has supported it for so long, and they're not really focusing on products, that directly sort of, answer questions that the creative community is asking right now. My hope right now is that these touch-based interfaces move to the point where, so we've got these iMacs right now. There's a 27-inch iMac that's available right now. It's the most beautiful screen you've ever seen, and it sits on an L frame, right? Really simple sort of design. My hope is that that thing goes into a touchscreen interface, and then they change that L frame so that it can sort of slide down in front of you and into more of sort of a table surface, and then you can draw on it or touch things or move, and then you can slide it back up when you want to view things.
Sure.
I'm really hoping it goes that way. Something similar to that. I mean, it was really sort of disheartening. Like, I was in the Chicago Apple store a month ago, like two months ago, and me and my friend Shampton, he was here, Shampton Alive, we walked through the store, and we counted how many active machines they had in the store. I think we came up to about 62 or 63 active computers were in that store, one of which was a tower. Only one computer in that whole store was a tower, which kind of, made me ask the question, where is Apple sort of going with catering to the creative community? Like, you can't do, you probably can get away with some video editing on iMacs and that sort of thing, but the powerhouses have always been those towers. You do a lot of the interactive and sort of all your artwork is pretty much digital. Is that something that concerns you at all, or that, has it even sort of crossed your radar?
I know, like, all my work is created like in a digital environment, but I use a tablet so much. I don't know what I would do without my tablet now. I really can't just use a mouse anymore for everything.
So use the pen and
stylus. Someone asked to see my tablet. I don't have it here. It's at home. I'm at my. So just so you guys know, I have a separate studio space, which I can kind of.
Oh, give us a tour! Awesome. Nice.
There's my friend Seth's here. What's up,
Go on, Seth. He's like, I'm busy. Don't bother me. I'm creating here.
And then
that's the first live video studio tour we've had on the show. It's a first here tonight, guys. You got it.
And I don't even remember what you asked me.
About we were getting into sort of the technical setup. So why don't you describe how you work and your pen and your stylus? That's how you concentrate.
Yeah, the kind of tablet I use, a Wacom 9, I think a 9x12. I don't know what size it is, but I know Josh Davis uses a Cintiq a lot, and I've thought about that, where you have the screen and you just draw like right into it. But yeah, I use it all the time. I think I don't really need anything more than just like a pen. And when I grew up, like, I feel like I was a really good age to grow up and not have a computer around me all the time. Like, I have a 13-year-old brother, and computer generation for sure. And I grew up.
He just lives on it all the time.
Yeah, and that's fine. But it's just going to be the way things are. But I grew up, just drawing all the time, and I really like
Mac or PC because you started so early. A lot of times in high school, all the high school sort of computer labs, the way you learn is on PCs. How did you make a transition at one time to go to Macs? Are you on Macs now?
Yeah, I am. And when I first started, I used the PC. I had a Sony Bio for a long time, and eventually I got a Mac, and it took a while to transition to it, but I did, and it's great. I don't even really think about it's nice to not have to think about too much the computer you're using just to use it. Like I want to have a computer and use it and not think about, not think about it. I don't want it to get in the way of anything. I think that's how everybody feels. So
Now, to bring up that sort of Mac PC debate, you recently did some work for Windows here.
Yep. Yeah, I did it
You got
on,
it
I
here
did
on
it
the
on a Mac.
screen. I get your website.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about this project. What are we looking at?
That is the Windows 7 default desktop, and I mean, awesome opportunity for me. I was just so excited to get it. And
So how
it
did
was
that happen? Did they call up and just say, "We love your style. Can you create a cool desktop for us"? Was it Bill
kind of
Gates that was like, "Hook it up, man"?
Yeah, Bill Gates texted me, and then Steve Ballmer kept sending me questions on MySpace, and I was like so turned off because nobody uses MySpace anymore. But then I warmed up to it. But actually, any huge company, any medium-sized big company typically has an agency that handles its advertising and its art and all that stuff for them. And their agency that was handling Windows stuff, Landor, in San Francisco, had an art buyer who contacted me about doing this work for a packaging product, and they didn't tell me what it was going to be, and they asked me for some work samples, and I sent them a handful of work that fit the description that they asked for, and then a couple, there was weeks and weeks that went by. Oh, the agency is Landor. Someone was just asking.
Okay.
And so Landor contacted me, and I know they contacted other artists as well, and they ended up going with my work, and they introduced me to the product. What the project was, told me it was going to be the default desktop for Windows 7, and the login screen for Windows 7, and also the packaging for Windows 7. And
that's awesome.
I mean, it was just a really, really, I don't even know. It was just an awesome project to get. So grateful to have worked on it.
So did you have a Windows 7 launch party at your house?
You can't ask me that kind of question.
Come on, yeah, I can.
No, I didn't, and yes, I thought that was a corny campaign.
You didn't order the napkins and tell your coworkers, let's play some games
You know what,
together.
though? I have to say, jokes aside, I've worked with a lot of really cool companies over the years, and Microsoft, for as big as they are, awesome team of people, super nice people. I can't say enough about how cool it was to work with such a big company, but feel like I was working with a really small group.
That's
of
awesome.
People, so it's cool. Yeah.
That's definitely a good feeling when you know that you got a good vibe with the people that you're working with.
For
It
sure.
helps everything, sort of social lubrication. Yeah. So we're looking here at the Bank of America, the Marathon building, that every year that they put up a huge illustration. And I remember seeing this and right away thinking about your style. Driving down the highway going, kind of looks like Chuck Anderson. And then I didn't find out until just recently that it was you. So
Yeah.
it's I felt really proud. When I found out, I was like, I called that, man. I called it right away.
Yes, that's an awesome project to have worked on as well. That was a really interesting one because actually it was one of those projects where they asked me at first and it didn't really, you get so used to being asked to do the same kind of thing. I get used to, being asked to, hey, we have a photo, can you put light and color on it, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I love doing that. I always try and do something new and fresh with that kind of thing. But for this project specifically, they had a concept of these runners comprised of shoes. And yeah, seriously, the typing is so distracting. But they had this project where the people were made up of shoes, and I mean, it was really cool because I literally drove to Dick's Sporting Goods, bought a bunch of sneakers, brought them back here, and
Really? So you were scanning them?
Yeah, I put ink on the bottom of the shoes, and then took the shoes and then pressed them down on the paper and scanned that in, and then some of them I put paper on the back of the shoes and went back to grade school type project where I took a crayon and you take the crayon and rub it all along the shoe
Get the depression
on
from
the
it,
paper
yeah.
and get the impression of it. Yeah. And then scan that in, and then I had all these different textures of shoes and things like that, and basically the same way that you would trace with tracing paper and a pen, I used the same kind of method. Like I put the photos of the people down, and I placed the shoes around, and it was really cool because actually, I mean, I don't know why you'd ever know this, anybody would ever know this until you actually do a project like this, but, the contours of a sneaker on the bottom of the shoe actually flow along, the human body in a lot of really interesting ways. Like, there'd be a part where, like, the guy's side right there, curves in, or, actually
They're
the
naturally
bottom
organic shapes,
yeah, they are, and I think the coolest one is this really small, excuse me, a really small little thing, but I found that like a shoe, the bottom of like the sole of a shoe, a sneaker is basically the same shape as an ear. So like every person's ear in this is just like a single shoe. And
I can see that now. I didn't notice that until you pointed it out. That is so cool. I mean, that just sounds like straight up fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
I would love to spend my day doing that sort of thing,
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a really cool project, and it was great to have it be, put up as big as it was for such a cool project. And one of the cool things about that was that there was a runner who was running, for breast cancer, and so her coloration was pink. And then there was a guy who's in a wheelchair. Now, the interesting thing about the guy in the wheelchair was that he didn't have legs. And so these are actually real people. They weren't stock photos. These are actual people who were in the marathon who have real stories, And so the guy in the wheelchair who didn't have legs, we were like, well, it doesn't really make sense to have him be made up entirely of shoes, considering he doesn't even have feet, And, it sounds kind of...
You've got the tire treads in there.
Yeah, so like I basically they're like, well, think about some different things that you could do to solve this, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to figure something out that doesn't get insensitive, like these the special Olympians in these things never want to stand out more than they already do, and so it was really cool. Like I just thought, well, why not just integrate the shoe prints with the tread and put them together, because they're really just trying to be one and the same, and it really worked out well. So.
Brilliant.
Kind of cool backstory.
Did you drive by that thing like 100 times?
Only a couple times when I was down in the city, and unfortunately, this really sucks, but I never actually drove by it when it was completely finished.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, so that was kind of a bummer, but the pictures on my site were taken by a guy down in Chicago, Chris, runs Some Odd Pilot Studios.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so I called him up and I was like, hey, I need pictures taken. Can you go take some pictures for me?
Can you run it down there?
Yeah, and I'll send you some stuff. And so he went over and took some pictures for me.
Awesome.
By the way, I'm not supposed to. Am I supposed to be answering these questions that come in, or just ignoring them for now?
Oh, you can if you want, if you see one that's cool. But we're also sort of harvesting. You know what? Oh my God. I can't believe this. It's already 8:45.
Yeah, that's what I was...
just like we're getting warmed up.
I know. Well, hey,
we should probably make that transition now. That's a good point. So we got a lot of questions actually. I was looking at the list just a second ago. There's a lot of audience questions here. Let me just kind of scroll down and look through them. My good friend Cal Nega, who's involved here in the AIJ Chicago group, her birthday is today, so shout out to Cal. But I promised her the first question. And I haven't seen one come through yet, but if I do, Cal, if I see one of your questions, I'll definitely throw them up there. So the first question here tonight comes from Forrester Design. Wants to know what's the best, I'm sure you get this every time you talk to anybody, what's the best advice for a young designer? Because that's a hard place to be in if you're trying to get noticed and get your work out there. So what if somebody's trying to get noticed and trying to get their stuff out and published, what would you say are the main things they need to focus on?
I would say, not... I would say, like, for me, when I was starting out, I was 18, so, like, I was doing it really out of a sense of desperation of, like, trying to figure out how in the world I was going to make any money. I didn't have a degree, so, like, for me, it's different. It's different for everybody, but, like, my best advice is to, number one, do it because it's something that you love to do. Don't do it because, you think that you're going to be some big famous person who's blah 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 blah, all doing all this big stuff. Just do it because you love to do it. I think if you set out to try and make some something out of nothing, it could work, but I just think to do it because you enjoy it, make connections, network, get to know people, but really it comes down to being yourself and doing it because you love it, not because you think there's going to be a ton of money in it for you, or because there's going to be fame and interviews and blah blah blah. It should really be because you love to do it, and let the rest of it come later.
Exactly. Very sound advice. DesignWits asks, Chuck, I was wondering if you have synesthesia. Synesthesia, I'm not sure what that is, especially because of the colors you use.
I don't know what that is.
I'm guessing that's the one where you hear things or you see things that you're supposed to hear, like you can see sounds. Like there was, like if you watch Heroes, there was a character on the
I don't watch
season
it.
who could, like, when somebody was playing piano, lights would sort of like float up from the piano.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. I know it would sound really cool if I said I did, but I don't.
You're not a superhero, Chuck. I'm very disappointed. This has totally brought down my whole night.
Yeah.
No, that's
so.
okay.
I mean, it's the funny thing is, like, I know my work has like a certain look to it, and the colors and lights and everything, but I just pretty much do what is fun to do, and I don't really sit around and obsess with it and think about color and light all the time. And it's funny, I've seen a lot of designers, no one in particular, but I just know I've like seen and read it and stuff. People do a certain type of work and then talk about it all the time and like talk about it being like just constantly talking about like what makes up their work. And I don't really live like that. I just like to do things and don't think about it that much. I still just do it because I like to do it,
Right.
So.
It comes from a heart then.
Just be cool. Just be cool.
Cool, man. Adam Groom wants to know, how did you get your artwork out there when you started?
We could talked about this a little bit already, but I mean, I will say this. I've spoken to at a lot of colleges and a lot of conferences and stuff, and one thing I always talk about that's kind of a funny thing, but I really like to say it. Like, seriously, take this, write this down as like a piece of advice and actually do, I guess. But when I first started out, I literally would sit with piles of magazines and, a notebook and a pen and write down the art director's name from the magazine. In the masthead, you can find the person's name. And then I'd go home and I would guess their email address with like, I had like a master list of like what an email address could be, like first name dot last name, or like first initial underscore last name and whatever, and I had like 20 combinations of this, and I would just send out emails and introduce myself and my work and say, hey, I'd love to work together, and then like I'd get 19 error messages back, and no one of them got through. So, and I actually worked with ESPN magazine that way.
No kidding.
I worked with a lot of different places that way. It was really funny. I mean, I don't know how that works now. I haven't done that in a while, but I mean, it was a great.
Well, the same sort of philosophy. This is really interesting that you said that. That's a really great little story because when we talked to Carlos Segura, his point that he likes to make is get up off your butt. If you don't like your situation, get up off your butt and do something about it. Stop whining about it and start taking action. And that's a really interesting way. Like, you figured out, I'm going to contact these people. I can't get their email address, but I'm going to find a way to get my message to them. Mm-hmm. So what does it hurt if you get 19 rejected messages back because it didn't get that person? The one that got through friggin' worked. Yeah. So it makes all that effort that you put into it worthwhile, and that's an amazing story.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yep. You got nothing to lose, and I've had a lot of people I've told that, and then people I talk to, will ask me, how do you build up that confidence to email them like that? Aren't you worried that they're not going to like it? I'm like, well, if you're worried that people aren't going to like your work, you're probably not ready to be sending those emails out. But once you get to the point where you're like happy with your work and like feel good about it, then go for it. You got nothing to lose. So, yeah. I'm trying to look at some of these questions that come through. They're going. Someone asked me.
Oh, don't worry about it. I've got a bunch of that I've saved already, so I'm serving them up. Ed Rock wants to know, what was it like being approached by Burton to create a design/pattern for their outerwear line?
Actually, I brought this to show everybody, but this is one of
Show and tell. Look at that. That is rad.
Watch. Look how ridiculous this is. This is like truly ridiculous. There's speakers.
Oh my God, the thing is glowing. That's sick.
No, but that's not it. There's speakers built in.
That's a speaker?
Yeah.
Get out of town.
So like, there's like a little receiver in there, whatever.
How much does that retail for?
Receiver. I'm gonna get killed for calling it a receiver. There's a thing you like plug in your iPod to or whatever, and there's like speakers built in, and so
and you
when
can
you're
be a walking stereo.
When when you're having like a tailgate party, and you got your really bright rainbow backpack with you, you can have a dance party.
Or if you just want to like record ridiculous things and throw your voice on the bus, that would be a lot of fun too.
Yep. But
That is rad.
yeah, Burton was cool. I mean, I basically did a pattern, and then they took that pattern and put it on like jackets and hoodies and backpacks and all sorts of different stuff. So.
Sefsar.
Wow, this did go fast, huh?
It really, see, it's amazing how fast you can fill up an hour. I mean, the first couple times I did this, I was really intimidated by, man, because I'm a designer too. Like my 9 to 5 is creating things, and for other corporate companies and that sort of thing. And I just started like finding a way to connect with other people online. And I just sort of set a goal for how long it was going to be. I was like, oh, okay, an hour sounds right. And it was very intimidating, just like the first couple of shows. But then you realize because it's a video chat, it's a conversation. It's not hard to hold a conversation for that long. And especially on these subjects, things that we're all very much interested in, it just kind of, just takes off, and it's been a lot of fun.
For sure. So we got like 4 minutes left? We'll do like a
I mean,
fire.
we won't get shut off like right then, so we can hang out for 4 more minutes. I'm sure.
All right,
it's okay.
cool.
Let's see. Sefsar wants to say, totally off topic, but what movie should I watch, Chuck? Any recommendations? Do you have a cool movie that you've seen recently?
Well, I will say, I don't normally like bring this up because it's not that big of a deal, but one of the seriously inspirations for, with the No Pattern name, actually, I was watching the movie Pi, which is a Darren Aronofsky film. Same guy who did like Requiem for a Dream and stuff, which is, I don't know, weird, but I mean, the movie Pi, if you've never seen it, definitely worth watching. Really like psychological kind of thriller movie, but just crazy. And I remember watching that and just being really fascinated by just by the whole thing and his patterns and all that stuff. And that was in my head as I was thinking of the name for sure. I love that movie, but more recent movies, I don't know. I'm just gonna stick to my my fail-safes: The Sandlot, Home Alone, and Home Alone 2.
Brilliant. Yeah, if you haven't seen any of those, highly recommend it. Also Pi. I've got a copy of that at home.
So I bet nobody's ever suggested watching Home Alone, The Sandlot, and Pi, and Home Alone 2 all at one time.
Never. It's in the history of man. I don't think that has ever occurred.
Nope.
But now we have it recorded.
We do.
So, Feature Creature wants to know what makes you want to make spacey designs. Why are you so weird, man?
I don't know. I have no idea where the actual like specific maybe inspiration or whatever like comes from, but just I don't know. It's just something I really enjoy working with. I actually used to be really into the work of oh geez, I'm trying to think of their names now. Jens Carlson, who did chapter3.net. All those guys who did that like really bright 3D explosive kind of stuff. Like I was really into that, which I think I took a lot of the inspiration from that, like the light and the color and all that stuff, and kind of always had that in the back of my head, and I kind of do that in a different way, but I think that had a lot to do with it. So.
Last question here.
Nathan Flood, G Monk, Mike Young, all those guys. Yeah.
Simon Petrie wants to ask, is there any way that Chuck would be willing to pass on one of his old project files? Because we could learn tons from it. So not so much, would you give us, your actual project files, but do you write tutorials? Do you ever put together sort of a process of how you got from point A to point B?
You know what? Gotta be totally honest. I don't really enjoy doing tutorials. Computer Arts has asked me a lot, and I love Computer Arts, and I really love that magazine and the people who run it and everything. And I think they do great stuff, and I think the people who do the tutorials, it's awesome. But there's something to me about figuring it out for yourself, and I don't know, that's not meant to be like a snarky answer in any way, but there's kind of a beautiful thing about experimenting for yourself. Because when I started out, like I didn't really get anybody's files or get anybody's stuff. I went to Borders bookstore and I got Photoshop how-to stuff for how to make fancy fancy lettering with like flames and ice and stuff like that, and just learned and just do it and have fun and learn for yourself and get out there and just try stuff. Again, there's nothing wrong at all. I think especially the stuff in Computer Arts or those, any site that has a tutorial there's definitely a lot to be learned from it. I have nothing against it, but just for me personally, I like to just really learn for myself. There's so many things to explore. The world is a big place. I hate to think that it'd be limited to a tutorial, just to figure something out. But so no, I'm not going to send any files, but I'm happy to answer questions anytime.
You're not going to open up your servers to us?
So yeah.
Well,
plus
Chuck,
my Photoshop files are like super messy, and I don't name my layers, and it'll make me look like I don't know what I'm doing. So
that's hilarious. Yeah, protect your secrets. Chuck, it's been a pleasure hanging out with you tonight. I think we could do another hour very easily.
Let's do it.
Yeah, on that note, I'd love to invite you back sometime.
Cool.
Very fun talking to you and sort of getting into your world and hearing, some of the intricacies of what you do. So next week we're going to be back. Got to make a quick announcement really quick. Mashable is no longer going to be doing video support and video chats. So what this means for us is DesignChat is now going to be doing web video on our own site, designchat.info. So pay attention. Throughout next week, I'm going to be sending out tweets and posting on our Facebook group. If you're not there yet, go to facebook.com and search for DesignChat, join the Facebook group, and also subscribe on iTunes. What do you got there?
Just, you should read Decibel Magazine, that's all.
Everybody should read Decibel Magazine, for sure.
I like to vouch for them. They're good people.
So next week, we're going to be talking to Stephen Heller. If you're not familiar, look him up. Very prolific design writer, Stephen Heller, going to be on our show, and we're going to be broadcasting on designchat.info. Look for more notices about that. So until next week, this is Design Chat. We love you guys. We love the design community. Chuck, thanks for hanging, man.
Rock and roll. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.